Welcome back to the Here We Go podcast. I am Trent Ging. Today I want to talk a little bit about what we're seeing out of Justin Fields. So if you've listened to me before when I've talked about Justin Fields, or when you've listened to Colin and I talk, we've always had an asterisk about Justin Fields saying that he's really going to have a big gap between he and Russell Wilson in this quarterback competition. Now, I didn't think there was a quarterback competition to start this camp. And to be perfectly honest with you, if Russell Wilson was 100% healthy, I don't think there would have been a quarterback competition. But as it stands right now, Russell Wilson is not healthy. Justin Fields has been 100% healthy, and he's making the most of it. So I had some thoughts on this. Now, if you saw the live show between Colin and I on Saturday, I said pretty plainly my inner Buckeye keeps trying to come out on this, and I try to temper that inner fandom there because it's kind of both of my favorite teams colliding in one player here, and I try to restrain myself and my bias on this a little bit. But there's some things that I thought about when it comes to Justin Fields and what we've seen now. So let me ask a question. How much stock should we put into what we're seeing right now playing out in front of our eyes versus the tape of the last 3 years playing in Chicago? And I think it's an interesting and it's an important question because, as I've said, I'm somebody who I don't live close enough to make trips over to Latrobe very frequently to where I could go to St. Vincent College and kind of watch these things play out in front of me. So, unfortunately, I rely on a lot of videos and after practice reports from different media members who are there on site. And I try to piece together and formulate an opinion based on what I see and what I hear. And I talked a little bit last night to Alan Saunders on X. Now, Alan's a guy that I deeply respect his opinions on because, quite honestly, he doesn't sugarcoat things. And he doesn't paint things in the pretty little picture that some media members tend to do. Let's be honest, we do have a lot of homers inside of Pittsburgh media. And they'll tell you everything's the shiny, great, perfect thing, when in reality it's not. So I do tend to go to the guys who are more analytical in the way that they try to evaluate things. Alan and Alex Kozora are two guys I try to utilize quite frequently. And I found it a little interesting because Alan is still saying there's a lot of the same deficiencies in Justin Fields from what we saw in Chicago. But when I check Alex Kozora's notes, because he's very detailed in putting out what statistics he can kind of piece together, and the numbers to me don't match up. So I tend to try to defer to Alan's opinion because, again, I respect him a ton, and I appreciate his evaluation as being honest, but it doesn't always mean I agree with everything Alan says. I think sometimes there are people who are going to be overly cautious when they put stock into a player because of the fact that if we've seen them on tape before, then you're going to lead yourself to believe what the tape shows. Now, throughout the history of the quarterback room, not just in Pittsburgh Steelers history, but NFL history, there are some guys that are better in systems than they are just outright. Chicago was a dumpster fire. There's no doubt about that. And one of the things that I have made an argument about is exactly this. that team drafted Justin Fields to be the entire team. They did not surround him with a ton of talent. The running game was effective there, but I would make the argument the running game was effective there because Justin Fields was on the team. You had to account for him and his rushing ability. And there's a lot of times where he was the best runner on the team and he led the team in rushing. In the NFL, it just does not work to have your quarterback lead the team in rushing and passing. They're supposed to lead the team in passing first. But they were a rushing football team, and Justin Fields was the guy who carried a lot of balls. Now, you don't want to kind of tamper down that athleticism and make it to where he's strictly a quarterback who plays in the pocket. You'd like to use his athleticism. But it's apparent to me that there's something with this Arthur Smith offense that kind of fits what Justin Fields does well. When Justin was at Ohio State, he was really, really good at getting the ball into his playmakers' hands and letting them go make plays. And when he needed to, he would make plays on his own. To me, from what I've pieced together, it seems as though he's starting to get back to that. He knows George Pickens is a special talent. And he's getting the ball out of his hands quickly and getting it as quickly into George Pickens' hands every play he can. The play action seems to be an area where he's having the most success from what I can piece together throughout this camp. And he's getting stronger every day. Friday Night Lights, he was fantastic. So while I still defer to Alan's opinion, and I respect where he's coming from, I don't know. It just seems like he's figured something out in this offense, and maybe we're putting too much stock into the Justin Fields of Chicago. I mean, by the same standards, should the Buccaneers have started Baker Mayfield last year? I mean, his tape wasn't good in Cleveland. His tape wasn't good in LA. But he had a fantastic season last year. Some guys fit really well into a certain system. The RPO stuff is all things Justin is very familiar with from Ohio State. Arthur Smith seems to be putting that in and letting Justin use his athleticism and his arm talent to his advantage. So I'm going to make the argument right now, not that Justin Fields should be quarterback one at the moment, but just that I feel like he really is closing the gap. And this is going to be a competition. I still think if Russell's healthy and if he comes back and he starts to play well, that Justin's going to have to continue to do a lot to take over that quarterback one role. But I personally don't feel like the gap is nearly as wide as it was. And the margin for error now for Russell Wilson starts to shrink. If he starts playing bad the first few games, there'll be a lot of people in the fan base calling for Justin Fields to get on right now and take over. I mean, 15 and 19, 132, and 4 touchdowns in the Friday Night Lights camp. The day before that in pads, 7 for 7. Yesterday, I heard in the 11-on-11 live part of practice, He was 4 for 4. I mean, he's putting some consistency together here. And it seems as though when he's in pads, he steps his game up. Now, this, of course, is going to have to continue. And he's going to have to continue to do this consistently to give himself a chance. But I just, if I'm Russell Wilson, I'm trying to get back on the field now. Because I don't think I want to continue to let Justin be in this rhythm and putting good days together. It is not going to bode well for his pole position, so to speak. I think at worst, you have to be encouraged by what you see out of Justin Fields. Because he's getting something figured out here. And it could be just as simple as, hey, you don't have to be the whole team anymore. Get the ball out of your hand on time, get it to the playmakers, and let them make plays. Preseason is going to be a lot of fun to watch. And I think it's a fan base. We learned the hard way last year that you can't put a ton of stock into the preseason. And I think that's why Allen really is saying the same thing right now about Justin Fields and camp. It's because we saw Kenny Pickett be so successful in camp last year. I mean, this offense looked like they were going to be putting up 24, 25 points a game. And that obviously wasn't the case. So I do understand his hesitancy. But I just wonder, how much can we continue to say the tape in Chicago is the same as what we're seeing right now playing out in this Arthur Smith offense? I think it's fair, in my opinion, and this is 100% just an opinion, to say that Justin Fields does a lot of the same things well that Ryan Tannehill did well. Ryan Tannehill found so much success under Arthur Smith because I think what Arthur Smith's offense does is it gives very clear defined line of sight to the receiver. And the play action stuff does bring the linebackers up a bit because we have a good running game. That gives more room for Justin to make some of these throws and see the openings quicker. It also lets him utilize his athleticism to move, whether it's to buy time or just to run with it. The difference between Justin Fields and Ryan Tannehill is his ceiling is so much higher than anything Ryan Tannehill was ever working with. Tannehill had a good arm, but Justin's got a very high-end arm. Tannehill could move. He had mobility. He could run. Converted wide receiver. But Justin Fields is electric with the ball in his hands. I have kind of thought since day one that Arthur Smith's style of offense fits Justin Fields so much better than it fits Russell Wilson. And it's going to be really interesting to see, does his offense change any with Russell Wilson? Because right now we're seeing a lot more usage of the middle of the field with Justin Fields. Russell Wilson doesn't throw over the middle of the field. Who is going to change? And if it's not going to be Arthur Smith, maybe Arthur Smith starts making an argument to Coach T that Justin's the better fit at quarterback in his offense. And maybe it should be Justin if this gap is closing. I did not think, again, I'm going to say this as many times as I have to. I did not think this was a true quarterback competition. I thought this was the same wording that was used when they talked about Kenny Pickett, Mitch Trubisky, and Mason Rudolph all in an open competition last year. There was no open competition. Kenny Pickett had the job and was not ever going to lose it. He had to play his way out of that job, which he did. I have felt like this was the same scenario with Russell Wilson. But I got to say, they get a day off today. Russell better be putting himself into practice tomorrow. He better be throwing more than one ball in a live team drill. Because to me, I think Justin's narrowing the gap. And if I've got my choice between a guy who's really, really close as a 25-year-old quarterback and a guy who's we're not sure where he's at as far as the longevity of his career left, and Russell Wilson at 35, I'm pulling the trigger. I'm going to the young guy and letting me see what I got as far as the future is concerned. I don't know. It's just something that popped in my head. Like I said, I totally respect Alan. Alan's saying that the same things Justin's had an issue with in the past are still the same things he's had an issue with now. Reading progressions is still an issue. Getting the ball out on time is still an issue. Holding the ball too long and taking sacks are still an issue. But so far, he's the only person who said that. I'd be really, really interested to see if anybody else comes out with that same kind of analysis, or if Alan's still just putting stock into the Chicago tape. Again, I understand it. If that's his way of looking at it and just being cautious, I totally understand that. I'm just not seeing it based on the information that I'm gathering. It seems like Justin's got something figured out, and maybe this coaching staff has worked with him in a different way than what he was getting in Chicago. I love Justin Fields. There's definitely some bias for me, and I'm really trying not to let that bias consume my thought process on this. But I said it when he was in Chicago. I thought he's gotten a raw deal. And I still stand by that now that he's in Pittsburgh. That organization asked way too much of a young quarterback. And now it seems as though he's relying on the playmakers, and he knows he has guys around him who can get the job done. So we'll see how this thing plays out. But to me, the gap is closing. And to me, I actually believe this is starting to become a real competition, not just kind of word salad from the organization as I thought it was going to be. I think Justin is turning this into a competition. And if I'm Russell Wilson, I'm trying to get on the field and I'm trying to take away some of those reps from Justin Fields because he's not doing him any favors right now. Justin is not doing Russ any favors. So we'll see what happens. We'll let this thing kind of play out. I just thought it's interesting, so I wanted to kind of put my thoughts out there on this. Tomorrow, I do want to talk about wide receiver 2. And I think that one's becoming less of a competition at this point. So I'll dive into that a little bit more tomorrow. And what impact could that have on wide receiver 3? So as always, I appreciate you watching. I love the feedback that I get from these. Please feel free to like, share, subscribe so that you know when these videos drop. Check it out. Have a great day. We're, 4 days away from seeing our first live action. Everybody have a good one.